Hello, Aubrey. How's it going?
I'm great, Lindsay. How are you?
Good. Yeah. Aubrey, how many idioms do you think exist in the English language?
Okay, this is funny because I looked it up for this episode. So I want to ask you, I
Okay.
was kind of shocked. What do you
Yeah,
think?
ask
How
me.
many
Ask me.
idioms do you think there are in English?
Oh my gosh. 2,000 maybe? I don't know. There's a lot. There has to be a ton.
That's probably about what I
No
would have
idea.
guessed. I thought maybe
Yeah.
about 2,000, I think. 25,000, Lindsay.
Oh my
25,000. It's
gosh.
shocking. There are
No
so
way.
many, which kind of makes sense because sometimes for an episode, I'll search a word to see kind of the most common idioms, and there will be hundreds for every word, like
Oh
idioms
my goodness.
that have these different
Yeah.
words, right? So there are
That's
so many
insane.
idioms. It's kind of difficult to know which you should learn for IELTS. You know, you need idiomatic language. How do you know which
Hmm.
ones to use?
Well, it makes me think that Australian English probably has 50, I don't know, 50,000 because I know Australian English has even more kind of idiomatic language than we do. So, wow. Okay. Well, I'm
And I'm
glad we're
not
here
sure if this
talking
was
about this today.
American English. This could be for all English
Okay.
dialects, maybe. So if
Okay.
this is Australian English and British English and American English, that would make more sense.
All
There's
together.
25,000
That would make more
across
sense.
all of them, but
Yeah, yeah,
who
yeah,
knows?
yeah, yeah.
Could be
That
just
makes more
American
sense.
English. I don't even know.
All right. Well, as before we get into today's episode, doing some sample answers, we're going to reveal our poll results from a previous episode, Aubrey. Yeah.
Yes, let's do it. This was a really interesting poll. We asked, what would you score if you took the IELTS speaking exam today? And so this is
Hmm.
interesting to share the results here.
Yes.
Nine, just one of our listeners thought they would score a 9 if they took it today. So 5%. That's interesting.
Huh.
Nobody put 8.
Yeah.
And then what about
And
for a 7?
yeah, band 7, 10% of you thought you would score a band 7. Very small percentage, isn't it?
Yes, right. And then 6 was 45%. So almost half of you.
Mhm.
And then what about
Mhm.
5?
5, band 5 was 40%. So many of us are living down in the 5 to 6 range, and that's why we're listening to the show, right?
Exactly,
We know
right?
that we need some kind of help. Yeah.
Yes, most of you probably are aiming for a 7 or higher. For some of you, a 6
Mhm.
might suffice, but most of you need higher than that. So, this is really interesting
Mhm.
to look at these results to see because one of the things that will push you from a 6 or a 5 to a 7 is using idiomatic language on IELTS speaking. So, this is part 3
Yes.
of a 3-part series where we've taught several idioms with the word moment that are more flexible. Of those 25,000 you have to choose from, a lot of them will be
Mhm.
too specific so that it's
Yes.
unlikely you'll be asked a question on IELTS that you could fit it into. These are more flexible for a lot of different questions. You could find a way to work these idioms into your answer.
I love it. And listeners, don't forget to hit the follow button before we go into these sample answers. As we saw in the poll, we want to be focusing on our score here. We publish 2 days a week, so make sure to hit follow. All
Yes, and if
right.
you missed part 1 and part 2, these can definitely be listened to out of order. So listen to
Yes.
today's part 2 answers. We'll give feedback, we'll share how we use these very high scoring idioms, and then at the end we'll share so that you can go back and listen to part 1 and part 2 if you missed them.
All right, let's dive into a speaking part 2 sample answer, Aubrey.
All right, I'm going
I'm
to
ready.
ask you a question, Lindsay.
Okay.
And for those of you out here who are listening, especially if you're new to preparing for IELTS, part 2 is where you're going to be describing something, but it could be anything, describing a
Mhm.
person, an experience, an object, and you need to take 2 minutes. And one of the tricks IELTS tries to pull is the examiner will say, you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop
Ooh.
you. I'll tell you when the time is up. That can really throw students off. If they hear that
Mhm.
1 to 2 minutes, you have to speak for that full 2 minutes in order to score
Okay.
7 or higher. So you want to speak until the examiner interrupts you. So, Lindsay, I'm
Okay,
going
good
to
to know.
time you. I'm
Yes.
going to give you that
All
full
right.
2 minutes, and then I'll say
Yes.
thank you, just like the examiner would. And just like
Mhm.
Lindsay is going to, when you are doing your part 2 answer, everyone out there listening, don't stop, don't summarize, just keep talking. So we talk here on the
Yep.
podcast a lot, strategies to fill that 2 minutes, tell a story, go off on a tangent, right? As long as you answer the
Mhm.
question, you can say anything related, right, Lindsay?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm
Yeah, so
ready.
you
Let's
want
do
to
it.
plan on that. Fill that full 2 minutes. So I'm going to get my
Yep.
timer ready. I'll stop you when
Okay.
the time is up. So don't worry about concluding or
Okay.
ending your answer.
Or
All right.
summarizing, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Describe a time when you suddenly realized something important.
Yeah, this is a great question. And it really brings me back to a very specific moment in my life where so many things kind of came together. So it was 2008. It was September of 2008. So we all know what that month was like. That was the global recession that we had when the banks came crashing down. I was living in the center of it in New York City. I was teaching at a English school for Korean students, and I had been working there for about a year. And things were good. My students were happy. My classes were lively. It was right there in Herald Square. I love the location. It was 4 hours a day in the morning. It was perfect for me at that time. And then all of a sudden, one day, I showed up to work and I was told that I was fired. You're fired. And it just didn't make any sense to me. What I had seen in my students' eyes and what I had seen in the classroom and how things were going didn't match up to what they were saying, that my students weren't happy with my class. And so eventually I realized that the reason I was fired was the fact that something about the administration, it was a state funded school and it was requiring certain qualifications, which had not been trained under the New York State TESOL regulations. And so they had to take me off the staff quickly. And so this gave me the realization that I needed to start my own company because I didn't think my career should be kind of decided in that kind of moment based on someone's mistake hiring me. So they initially shouldn't have hired me, and that's where I made the mistake. I made the decision that I was never going to work for anyone else ever again. So I remember sitting on the steps talking to a friend from my apartment building and saying, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to do whatever it takes so this situation doesn't happen again. And the seeds had already been sown because I had lived in a home where my dad had his own business for years, and he had been telling me, "Be your own boss, be your own boss." That common
Thank
refrain.
you. Oh, wow. I'm
Yeah,
like jotting down all of the great vocabulary I want to point out. Well
yeah,
done, right? To fill 2 minutes can feel like a long time, but you can see the strategies Lindsay used here. You first were saying it brings me back to a specific moment. And instead of diving right into answering the time when you realize something important, you set the scene. It was
yes.
September of 2008. We all know what was happening there, and you shared details about what was going on in the world at the time. This is such a smart thing to do, right? Even with
Mhm,
telling a story, if you dive in at the moment where you're answering the question, it might be hard to fill 2 minutes. But where you went back
mhm.
and gave all that historical
Yeah.
context, it probably felt pretty easy to speak for 2 minutes, right?
Yeah, it did. Although, as I got through the answer, I was worried that I had set too much context and I wasn't getting to fully answering the question quickly enough because I hadn't really answered the question of what was the realization that I made. I just set the scene talking about being fired. And then so I panicked a little bit in the middle.
Like I have to still answer the question.
Yes,
That brings up
exactly.
a
But I think
really
it turned out
interesting
okay.
point too, because
Yeah.
that we can risk that, right? If we're telling a
Yeah.
story and maybe we go off on a tangent and then we forget to come back, that could hurt our
Yeah.
score. Or if we give too much context and never actually
Yeah.
answer the question, right? It is vital that you directly answer that question. So it was very
Hmm.
important for your score that you did describe a time when you suddenly realized something important, but that's
Yeah.
perfect where you realized, even if it were, even if you had 15 seconds left, if you then
Yeah.
immediately and directly answer that question, that would still be a very high
Yes.
scoring answer.
Okay. Excellent. Love it.
Yeah. So
All
there's
right.
other
So
vocab I
really,
wanted to point out
yeah.
here. This was
Hmm.
all really, really good. Then your transition phrases as well, because when you tell a story, you want to make sure it's not disjointed. Your fluency and coherence score depends on you flowing smoothly from one idea to the next. And one of the really
Hmm.
good phrases you used was, and then all of a sudden one day. So you've given this
Hmm.
context, you've given the background, and now you're moving to what happened one day that made you have this realization, have this light bulb moment. And this is
Yes.
a great transition into that then all of a sudden one day. And it also gives you a great way to have interesting intonation, right? All
Oh,
of a
yeah. Yes.
sudden, one
Yes.
day, it's easy to hit that
Yeah.
harder.
That's why it really helps when we're telling a true story, a story that is very visceral for us. Because as I was saying, all of a sudden one day, I pictured myself walking into the office and getting this news. And I still remember the moment, right? We remember moments when we get fired from jobs. We remember it. And so
Exactly.
just so useful for
Yes, and just
intonation.
to share all of the details, everything you remember. You said, I remember sitting on the steps talking to a friend. This is perfect, right? When you're
Mhm.
bringing the listener, whether it's the examiner, if you're having a conversation with someone else, putting yourself back in that moment and sharing what you remember, describing. You could even describe the sounds, the smells, everything that's happening, right?
Yes.
But just to put yourself there, say what you remember, the details that stand out to you. And then I also
Mhm.
want to point out a really good idiom you used besides, this being this light bulb moment for you, to say the seeds had already been sown by your father, right? The
Yes.
example that had been
Yes.
set. This is another idiom that could come up. We talk literally about seeds being sown, right? Sowing seeds when we're
Mhm.
planting seeds in a garden or in a field, and we use it idiomatically as well to talk about an idea being planted or an example that's set that also sows a seed.
Love it. So good. So
Awesome.
much good stuff for our listeners to write down today and to
Yes.
try to bring into their own exam if they can, these special idioms. Should we take a quick break, Aubrey, and then we'll come back and hear your sample answer?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Okay, Aubrey, we're back from break and I'm going to set up my timer here. And let's see. So we've got 2 minutes for the speaking part two. Let me set it. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, here we go. So, please describe a trip or an outing you went on with friends or family.
Luckily, just recently, I took a very fun trip that I am excited to tell you all about. We did what's called the Route of the Hiawatha, which is a bike trail in northern Montana that used to be train tracks. The train has been removed, the tracks have been removed, and now it's a bike trail. It goes through several tunnels, one of which is a mile long. So you have to have
Mm,
lights, headlamps to light the tunnel. I couldn't believe it was shocking how cold it got in the tunnel. We had to have hoodies. But then as soon as you get out of the tunnel, the sun was still quite warm. And then you're on these elevated bridges up in the treetops. So it was quite magical to be so high and to look down hundreds of feet. A little traumatic for anyone who has a fear of heights, which some of our group did. I was with my entire extended family, all of my siblings, my parents, all of their kids. It's a very family friendly bike trail because you're just coasting downhill most of the time. And then at the bottom, a shuttle takes you back up to your car. So it's like 15 miles, but pretty chill. You're just, leisurely making your way. You stop for lunch, and it was absolutely lovely. Really beautiful views, super scenic. And it was also fun to meet people from all over the world because this is the bucket list item for a lot of people who've heard about it or have seen pictures of this very cool bike ride. And so I was asking people along the trail. I met someone from the Middle East, several people from Asia, Europe. It was really fun to chat with some of the other tourists, but also made me realize, why haven't I done this before? Growing up, it was about a 6-hour drive from where I lived my entire life. And this was the first time I had gone. So, kind of embarrassing, really, that I hadn't
thank
taken this
you. Thank
opportunity.
you. Excellent. Oh my gosh, you're making me want to go on this trail now.
You should. It's so fun. We loved it.
Oh, I love this. So, some things that I loved for your answer. You started off with luckily, I've just taken this amazing trip, right? So, that's another interesting way to start your answer. Kind of tuning into what your emotion is, how you feel about that trip, but the fact that you have that answer is an interesting way to get started.
Yes, I
Um,
love, and you want
yeah.
to avoid just saying, today I will talk about, or I am going
Yes.
to describe. You don't want to repeat the question, right? I'm going to describe a trip or
Yes.
outing I took. You need an
Oh my
interesting
gosh.
way to start your question. We have lots of episodes with those interesting ways, and this is another good one, right? Share that you're
Yep.
excited to talk about this.
There's no better way to put the examiner to sleep, Aubrey, than saying, "Today I will talk
Today I will
about my
talk
trip."
about, yes,
No, I'm already bored, right?
and it's
Avoid
very
that.
low scoring vocabulary. You're probably repeating vocabulary from the
Yes.
topic. So, yes, don't do that.
You got it. Yeah. I also like how you said we did what's called the route of the Hiawatha. So that's creative grammar. It's a little bit different. I know we cover this grammar point in our B1 fluency course, but it's a little bit more creative in terms of the way you're phrasing that. I liked that. I thought that was unique and different.
Yes, very native and natural, right? I could say we did the route of the Hiawatha, but when I'm saying it
Right.
to someone who's not familiar with that trail, we
Mhm.
often will do that instead, right? We did what's called, or saying like we did this thing that is called the route of the
Mhm.
Hiawatha.
Yeah, I love that. I also loved how you used a little intonation when you talked about the temperature. I couldn't believe how cold it got. So, the way you used that phrase, and also I felt the energy, and I could almost feel how cold it was when you phrased it that way. So,
Nice.
pronunciation score probably getting better there.
Absolutely. Yes. The
Uh,
more you
mhm.
vary your intonation, if I told this story and if I'm sharing how surprising the cold was in a monotone, that would be very strange and unnatural and very low scoring. If you're talking about something
Mm.
that was exciting or fun or interesting, you should
Yep.
sound interested about it. So punch those
Yes.
adjectives and adverbs harder, slow down so you can emphasize words so that you can be more
Yes.
expressive.
Yes, I love it. And you also used native phrases like quite magical. It was quite magical. I like that. I liked the phrase family friendly. And then you used a slang, pretty chill. It was pretty chill, or we were pretty chill. I don't remember the exact context, but it sounded native and natural to me. So
Nice.
nice work,
Awesome.
Aubrey.
Thank you. Yes, these were
Yeah.
really fun sample answers. I'm realizing I wanted to work into that it was a spur of the moment decision.
Uh,
It was unplanned and we weren't sure we'd be able to go, but I'm not sure I ended up talking about that. I think as
right.
you're practicing answering questions, definitely record yourself, listen back,
Hmm.
evaluate yourself just like we were. If you didn't
Hmm.
end up using those idioms, find out, think about it, work backwards. How could I
Yeah.
work that in? What could I
Okay.
change to work it? Or is there another idiom that I could add to that answer? You want to be very
Hmm.
proactive and intentional about adding idioms to your answer because it's not easy. When we're speaking, we don't always have the perfect idiom to add. This must be practiced.
Yeah, and also just to emphasize that even if it sounds like you had been planning that trip for a while, so it wasn't a spur of the moment decision, but that's okay. We can create a story by mixing truth with lie on IELTS. No one's going to know the difference, right? The
Yeah, that's
examiner doesn't
true.
know. So you
Hmm.
could set the stage in the beginning and say, we were sitting on the couch in Idaho, and all of a sudden, boom, spur of the moment decision. We decided to do the Hiawatha. And then you tell the true story. No one will know the difference. You'll have that vocabulary in there that you wanted to use.
Absolutely. Good point, right? The examiner
Yes.
doesn't know what's true. So if you think of an idiom and you could adjust your story a little bit so that you're able to use it, absolutely do it.
I love it. Any final takeaway for today, Aubrey? These have been two great examples.
Yes, I love this series. Definitely go back and listen to part 1. If you missed it, it was IELTS Energy 1512. Take a moment to boost IELTS vocabulary scores. And
Mhm.
then 1514 was part 2, Band 9 Idioms for IELTS Speaking, part 2. Or this was no, that's not
This
right.
this one's 1514.
1513, have a light bulb moment
Yeah.
with IELTS Speaking Part 1 answer. So that's the entire
Yes.
series. It's
Yep.
really important that you not only learn idioms, don't just add them to a vocabulary list. If you can hear sample answers like this, practice your own sample answers. That's when you'll really be ready for test day.
Love it. So good. And thanks for the sample answer today, Aubrey. You have a good day. I'll see you very soon.
Awesome. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.